You're listening to the story. Cowboy rescues 13-year-old girl chained to her father's skeleton, then learns the truth about the gold. A haunting discovery in a forgotten desert cabin leads to a secret buried deeper than bones and a truth no one was ready for. The desert had a way of erasing things, memories, even sins. For Boone Carter, it had erased a dozen tracks before he could pin down the Crimson Creek gang. But as the sun bled across the Nevada sky, found what might be the end of the trail. A splintered shack standing crooked like it was ashamed to still be standing. His horse let out a nervous whinny as they approached. The air reeked of death, death, and something else. Rot, soaked in time. Boone drew his revolver, not out of fear, but reflex. He'd followed fugitives for most of his 35 years, and this cabin gave him the same uneasy prickle as the ones with ambushes waiting inside. He kicked the warped door open with a boot hardened by miles and blood. Inside was quiet. Not abandoned quiet, but haunted quiet. Then he saw her. A girl no older than 13 sat in the corner of the one-room shack. Her dark hair clung to her face in oily strands, and her blue dress was shredded and faded, as if time had lost interest in preserving it. She didn't scream or flinch. She simply stared. Boone's eyes followed the line of rusted iron from her bruised ankle to what she was chained to. A skeleton, a human skeleton, bones laid bare, sun-bleached, and picked clean by the elements and time. The clothes still clinging to the corpse were threadbare and faded, but unmistakably male. Boone had seen death in all its forms, fast, slow, deserved, tragic, but this was different. The girl didn't seem terrified. She looked, resigned. He approached slowly, careful not to startle her. The floor creaked beneath him, crunching on scattered pieces of old glass and bones. The stench wasn't just from death, it was the smell of someone living beside it for far too long. Her eyes followed him like an old soul trapped in a young body. She didn't speak until he crouched before her. "Are you here to take me away from Papa?" Her voice was dry and cracked, as if it hadn't been used in weeks. Boone's heart paused for a moment, caught between logic and horror. He glanced again at the skeleton child. He said, removing his hat gently, "How long have you been here?" She looked down at the bones with something that might have been affection. "Papa said never to leave him. He said bad men would come if I wasn't here to guard him." Boone noticed now that the chain had worn her ankle raw. The skin was blistered, red, and infected. And yet she clung to the corpse like it was the last ember of safety in the world. "What's your name?" he asked. "Mercy," she replied, her fingers brushing one of the skeleton's arm bones. Mercy Whitmore. The name hit Boone like a slap. Silas Whitmore had been one of the most wanted men west of the Mississippi. A ghost among outlaws, blamed for at least 15 robberies and more than 24 killings. But no one had seen him in over 3 years, till now. This was your father?" Boone asked, stunned. She nodded. "Silas Whitmore, my papa." The puzzle was twisting into something darker than Boone had imagined. How had she survived here? Who had left her? Why hadn't anyone found her? How did he die? Boone asked gently. "He got sick," she whispered, "after the bad men came. They hurt him real bad, but he wouldn't tell them where the money was. He made me promise to stay with him. Said the buzzards would take his bones if I left. He said he wouldn't rest." The cabin's floor was littered with strange offerings, piles of fabric, dried flowers, broken things. Mercy had been tending to her father's corpse like it was a shrine. Boone knelt beside her. "Mercy, do you know where your father hid the money?" She flinched slightly, and for the first time, fear crossed her face. "He told me never to tell. Said it was the only thing keeping me safe." She tugged at the chain instinctively, as though it grounded her. Her eyes flicked toward the boarded-up window as the sound of distant hoofbeats echoed through the desert air. "They're coming," she whispered, voice trembling now. "They're back." Boone stood in one smooth motion and moved to the window. He peered through a crack and spotted 5 riders headed straight for the cabin, armed, fast, mean. And the leader, he recognized that face. Dutch Kellerman, ruthless, cold, one of the last real outlaws still breathing in Boone's blood. Dutch was his nephew. Boone's hand slid to his Colt revolver. "Mercy," he said, urgency creeping into his voice. "I need you to tell me right now, where did your father hide the money?" Tears welled in her eyes. "Papa said it was cursed, said anyone who found it would die. But he made sure they wouldn't." "How?" She looked down at the tail. "Skeleton." He swallowed it. Swallowed the map. Boone felt a chill crawl up his spine. That explained why no one had found it. Not in the floorboards, not in the dirt, not in any saddlebag. It was hidden in the one place no one dared to look inside. A dead man. Outside, the hoofbeats grew louder. Dutch and his men would be there in moments, and Mercy was still chained. Boone's mind raced. He had to choose, face down 5 armed men to save one girl, or leave her hand the truth dashed behind. He reached for a pickaxe leaning against the cabin wall, rusty and forgotten. "We'd have to. Hold still," he said, raising it over the chain. Mercy stopped him, gripping his wrist with surprising strength. "Papa said, a man would come, with kind eyes and dangerous hands." Boone froze, and he said, "If I ever told the truth to that man, I'd be free." The pickaxe trembled in his hand. The past and present had collided in this one moment, and outside, hell was about to ride through the door. The chain snapped with a loud clang as Boone brought the pickaxe down. The old iron link, rusted by years of neglect and desert wind, finally gave way. Mercy winced as the metal pinched her skin one last time, but her expression was calm, resigned. Even she looked back at her father's remains. "Papa won't rest easy," she murmured, "but I can't let him die twice." Boone didn't have time to process the heartbreak in her words. The riders were nearly at the cabin. Now he could hear their shouts, their boots slamming into stirrups, their guns clinking with each gallop. Key moved fast, checking the chamber on his revolver. 6 shots, maybe just enough. Then the door burst. Inward, sunlight poured into the room, framing the men in silhouettes. 5 of them, rifles ready, eyes scanning like wolves circling a wounded calf. In front stood the man Boone had hoped never to see again. Dutch Kellerman's once boyish face, now carved with bitterness, a jaw tight from years of hate. Well, Dutch drawled, cocking his head. "Look what the desert blew in, Uncle Boone. Been a long time." Boone didn't lower his weapon, but he didn't raise it either. Mercy clung behind him, her bare feet scraping against the dirt floor. She was trembling now, but silent. "Danny," Boone said, quietly, using the boy's name he'd once known. "It's Dutch now," the outlaw snapped. "Danny died in a jail cell after his uncle threw him in like a stray dog. You remember that?" Boone felt it all rush back 15 years ago, turning in a wild-eyed 18-year-old for a robbery he hadn't meant to go so wrong. Boone had hoped a few months behind bars would scare him straight. Instead, it turned him into this. "I did what I thought was right," Boone said. "You were headed for a grave." Dutch smiled without warmth. "And now, here we are, digging one." Behind Dutch, one of the outlaws' pike, a hulking brute with a twisted scar down his face, nodded toward Mercy. "That the girl?" Dutch didn't answer. He already knew. "She's been guarding the grave like a loyal pup. And I think she knows where the treasure is." Mercy's voice rose, trembling, but defiant. My papa didn't steal nothing. He was a good man. Pike snorted. Your papa killed more folks than the cholera. Enough, Boone snapped, stepping between them. This girl's been through hell. You want to dig up gold? Dig your own damn graves. Dutch raised his gun slowly. You think you can stop us, old man? No, Boone said calmly. But you know I'll try. For a moment, it looked like bullets would fly. But then, Stez's fingers tightened around triggers. Everything changed. A thunderous voice rang out from the ridge behind the cabin. This is Captain Harlan Briggs of the 3rd Cavalry. Lay down your weapons and come out with your hands up. Everyone froze from the cracked cabin window. Boone saw them dozens of mounted soldiers, rifles drawn, surrounding the shack like a noose tightening. Dutch cursed under his breath. The cavalry. What the hell do they want? Mercy's eyes widened. They're here for Papa, she whispered. Dutch whirled toward her. What did you say? It told me, she said, her voice small, that one day the government would come looking for what he took. Boone stepped forward. Silas Whitmore wasn't just a bank robber, was he? Mercy reached into her torn dress and pulled out a bundle of old cloth. She unwrapped it slowly, carefully revealing a piece of yellow paper, brittle at the corners. Boone took it and read the faded ink. It was a presidential pardon, signed by President Ulysses S. Grant, but not for robbery. It was for services rendered to the Union in matters of national security. Boone's breath caught in his throat. Silas hadn't stolen the Carson City money for himself. He'd taken it under orders. A spy, an operative, and Mercy had been guarding not just a grave, but a secret operation buried beneath sand and lies out outside. Captain Briggs called again. Silas Whitmore, we know you're in there. Send the girl out unharmed, and we will consider a plea arrangement. Dutch turned pale. They think he's still alive. Boone's mind worked fast. They think Mercy is his daughter. Maybe that's our leverage. Dutch looked torn, eyes flicking between Boone, the soldiers, and Mercy. You said he was dead, he growled. He is, Boone replied. But if they think otherwise, maybe we can get her out of here alive. A plan was forming. Dangerous, reckless, but better than being gunned. Down like animals, Mercy pointed to a trapdoor in the far corner. There's a tunnel, Papa showed me. It leads to a well outside. Dutch's eyes lit up. We could slip through while they think we're still inside. Boone hesitated. Trusting Dutch was a risk, but right now it was either ride with the devil or die with the truth. He nodded. Then let's move. Bullets might come. Soldiers might not believe them. But Boone knew one thing for sure. This wasn't about gold anymore. It was about saving. A girl who had already survived the worst kind of captivity, child chained not just to her father's corpse, but to his legacy. The trapdoor creaked as Mercy lifted it with shaking hands. A gust of earth-choked air blew up from the darkness below. Boone peered down, lantern in one hand, revolver in the other. Wooden steps descended into a narrow root cellar carved crudely into the dirt. You're sure this leads out? He asked. Mercy nodded. Papa said it ends near the old well, past the dry creek bed. Dutch gave a quick glance outside. Soldiers were shouting to one another, circling. Gunfire hadn't started yet, but it would. The cabin was a powder keg, seconds from going up, down, Boone ordered. Mercy climbed into the dark without hesitation. Out. Dutch followed, shotgun slung over his shoulder. Boone came last, sealing the trapdoor above them, just as a cavalry bullet smashed through the cabin window. The tunnel was tight, too tight for comfort. The ceiling hung low, dirt crumbling from the walls. Wooden support beams groaned as if remembering their age. Every step sounded louder than it should have. Boone stayed close behind Mercy, its lantern casting long shadows along the walls. "You're Papa. Dig this alone. He started it years ago. Said a man with enemies should always have an exit." Dutch snorted. "Smart man. Smarter than you thought," Boone said, eyeing his nephew sideways. They moved quickly, the echo of chaos behind them growing fainter. Boone couldn't help but notice how steady Mercy was. No crying, no complaints. Forward. "How did you survive in that cabin all this time?" he asked quietly. "Papa taught me," she said. "How to trap rabbits, how to store water. He left supplies buried. I just had to remember where." Dutch raised a brow. "And what about the map? The gold? That's still real?" Mercy hesitated. Then she reached into her dress again, pulling out something Boone hadn't expected. A small bundle of bone fragments wrapped in cloth. "This," she whispered, "was in Papa's rib cage." Boone felt his stomach twist. He recognized the small scrap inside a piece of waxed parchment, barely legible from time and blood, but clear enough to make out landmarks, coordinates, symbols. It was a map. Dutch stepped closer, eyes narrowing with hunger. "That's it. That's the damn fortune." Mercy drew the cloth back into her chest. He said, "It's cursed." "Everything worth something is," Dutch muttered. Boone shot him a warning glare. "Touch her or that map, and I'll end you, before the cavalry ever finds us." They reached a fork in the tunnel. One path led into deeper shadow. The other sloped upward, faintly. "Which way?" Dutch asked. Mercy looked unsure. She bit her lip. "Papa said, always go left underground." Dutch grunted, comforting. As they turned into the left passage, the sound of footsteps echoed from above. Soldiers searching the cabin ruins. "Move," Boone urged. "We've got minutes, maybe less." The tunnel narrowed further, forcing them into single file. Boone brought up the rear, nerves on fire. At any moment, one misstep could bring the ceiling down or worse, lead them straight into enemy hands. Suddenly, Mercy stopped. "There's someone ahead," she whispered. They crouched, still as stone. And then it came, a flashlight beam cutting through the dark from the opposite side. Voices, faint at first, then louder. There in the tunnels, a soldier barked, "Spread out, watch for traps." Boone cursed under his breath. The cavalry had found the other entrance. They were now boxed in between the army above and death below. Dutch hissed, "Now what?" Mercy stepped forward with surprising courage. "Papa told me one more thing, it ever came to this." From her pocket, she pulled another bundle, a piece of folded parchment sealed in wax. Boone opened it under the lantern light. His mouth went dry. A second document, official, unmistakable. A military pardon, signed 2 weeks before Silas's death. Issued not for a crime, but for covert intelligence operations sanctioned by the United States government. Silas Whitmore hadn't just been a criminal. He had been a soldier, a spy, and the Carson City heist wasn't robbery. It was a black ops mission. "Why didn't you show this earlier?" Dutch asked, stunned. "Because I didn't trust you," Mercy answered simply. Boone stared at the paper, connecting the pieces. Silas had been working under presidential orders. Key had taken the money, not to steal it, but to protect it for the Union, for the country. "This changes everything," Boone said. "Tell that to the men with guns behind us." Dutch growled. Boone turned back down the tunnel, raising his voice. "Captain Briggs, this is Boone Carter. I have Mercy Whitmore with me and a federal pardon signed by President Grant." A long silence, then a voice echoed back, "Proof." Boone held the document up toward the flicker of torchlight. "It's real." Silas Whitmore was Union intelligence. He was operating under direct orders. The pause that followed was heavy. Then, slowly, the voices above ceased. Footsteps retreated. Captain Briggs's voice returned, calm and cautious now. Remain where you are. We're coming down. Boone lowered the document. Dutch exhaled slowly. Well, he muttered, looks like your papa was more hero than outlaw. Mercy didn't smile. He was both. Dutch looked at Hurley for the first time. I'm sorry, kid, Sid nodded, still clutching the map. Behind them, boots sounded in the tunnel cavalry, coming not to capture, but to confirm Silas's secret, his mission. His daughter, they were all coming into the light, but it wasn't over yet, because not everyone was ready to let go of the gold, and some would still kill to claim it. The cavalry boots echoed louder in the tunnel, the clinking of spurs and weapons growing nearer with each step. Connie Mercy clutched the map close to her chest, while Boone and Dutch stood in tense silence. The lantern's flame flickering nervously. Against the dirt walls, Captain Harlan Briggs appeared first, ducking slightly to fit under the low ceiling. He was broad-shouldered, gray-haired, and wore the solemn expression of a man who'd seen his share of blood. Behind him, 2 officers followed, weapons lowered but ready. Briggs eyed the group carefully, then nodded at Boone. You, Carter? Boone gave a slight nod. This is Mercy Whitmore, K. And this, he handed the document over, is the presidential pardon her father carried, signed by Grant himself. Briggs studied the paper in the dim light, jaw tightening as he read. We've been chasing the truth about Silas Whitmore for 3 years, he said. Some claimed he went rogue. Others said he was still on assignment. And Boone asked. Briggs looked up, his face unreadable. Looked like he was loyal until the end, and abandoned for it. Mercy said nothing. Her face showed no relief, only the same heavy stillness she'd carried since Boone found her. Behind them, Dutch leaned against the tunnel wall, arms crossed. So now what? We'll go topside and pretend this never happened. Briggs fixed him with a hard stare. You're Dutch Kellerman. There's no pretending with you. Dutch smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. Figured. Boone stepped forward. Listen, Captain. He helped us down here, gave up his weapon, protected the girl. Briggs gave a grunt of consideration. That might buy him something. A cell with a view. Dutch chuckled. I've seen worse. Mercy finally spoke. He could have taken the map. He didn't. Briggs looked at her with surprising softness. Noted. But just as things seemed to settle, another sound echoed down the tunnel. Footsteps. Not boots, not military. Boone spun around, raising his lantern high. From the opposite direction, the far, dark branch of the tunnel, they came. Fast, reckless. A group of Dutch's men, Morrison, Pike, and 2 others. They must have followed them through the second entrance. And they were still hungry for treasure. Boss, Morrison shouted, weapon raised. We're not letting the gold go that easy. Dutch tensed, eyes darting between his old crew and the soldiers beside him. Stand down. Briggs barked. Or, what? Pike sneered. This is our payday. In the chaos, Mercy took Boone's hand and pulled him behind a support beam. There's another exit, she whispered. Papa showed me. It's just ahead, but it's narrow, one at a time. Boone nodded. Okay, take the map and go. I'll cover you. I'm not leaving you, she protested. Dutch overheard. She's right. Uncle, we either all make e-tour, none do. For the first time, Boone saw something flicker behind Dutch's hardened expression. Regret. Redemption. Maybe both. Morrison raised his gun, but Dutch moved faster. He stepped into the line of fire, shouting, if you want that map, you'll have to shoot through me. The outlaws froze, stunned. Pike hesitated. Boss, ... What the hell are you doing? Dutch's voice was calm, making the only good choice I've got left. Okay. The moment broke as Briggs's soldiers charged forward. Shots rang out in the confined space. deafening. Boone pulled Mercy down, shielding her. Dirt rained from the ceiling. Dust clouded the air. When it cleared, Morrison was dead. Pike lay wounded. The others had fled. Dutch was on the ground, blood spreading across his shoulder. Boone crawled to him. "Hold on, Danny." Dutch coughed, grimacing. "Guess this is what I get for trusting family again. You did the right thing." Dutch looked at Mercy, who had crept to his side. "Tell your papa, ... I tried to be better, Dan." With a sigh, he went still. Mercy cried quietly. Boone rested a hand on her shoulder. Briggs stood in silence, removing his hat. "He may have been an outlaw," Briggs said, "but today he was a soldier." They carried Dutch's body out together. Above ground, the evening sun cast long shadows across the desert. The cabin was now a skeleton itself, charred and shattered from the cavalry's earlier sweep. A wagon stood nearby, waiting to carry Silas Whitmore's bones east for burial. Mercy watched the soldiers gently lift what remained of her father. For the first time since Boone met her, she looked like a child, fragile, wounded. Free. Briggs approached with a new Documentan official record, clearing Silas's name. "He'll be buried with full honors," he said. Mercy nodded. "Thank you." Boone turned to her. "Where will you go now?" Briggs answered for her. "We've contacted her relatives in Missouri. She'll be cared for." Boone didn't hide his emotion. "She deserves better than all of this. She'll get it," Briggs said. "And so will her father." As the wagon rolled away, Boone watched the dust trail fade into the golden distance. The treasure would be left buried for now. Mercy had no interest in gold, only peace, and for the first time in years, Boone felt something like it stirring in his own heart. The sun dipped lower in the sky as the cavalry wagon rumbled away with Silas Whitmore's remains. Boone Carter stood at the edge of the clearing, arms folded, the desert wind pulling at the brim of his hat. Mercy sat nearby on a rock, her chin resting in her hands, staring into the horizon. She hadn't said a word since Dutch fell. Captain Briggs joined Boone, quiet for a while. Then he asked, "You believe what the girl said? That Silas swallowed the real map?" Boone nodded slowly. "I've seen enough to know she's not lying. That little piece she had matched terrain south of Carson City. Old mining paths, forgotten wells." Briggs studied him. "We could excavate, claim it for the Union. After all, it was federal property. And what would you do with it?" Boone asked. "Pay more men to die chasing secrets. Bury it in paperwork until it disappears again." Briggs didn't answer. Instead, he handed Boone an envelope. Inside was a writ of amnesty for Dutch Kellerman posthumous. Based on his actions in the tunnel, he bought Mercy's chance at life, Briggs said. "This doesn't erase what he did, but it tells the other half of the story." Boone swallowed hard and nodded. He deserved that much. Nearby, Mercy stood, her hair blowing across her face. "Can I go say goodbye?" she asked quietly. Briggs nodded. She walked to where Dutch's body lay wrapped in canvas. She didn't cry, but she placed something on his chest, a dried flower, once part of the strange offerings she had laid around her father. Boone walked over and crouched beside her. "You all right?" She didn't look at him. He was a bad man, but in the end, ... he was kind. "Sometimes people are both," Boone said. "Sometimes they spend their whole lives trying to figure out which side wins." She finally looked up at him. "Which side won in you?" Boone blinked. The question struck deeper than he expected. "I'm still figuring that out." They stood in silence until the wind changed. It carried the scent of sagebrush, far cleaner than the rot and blood they left behind. Boone turned toward the trail east. "You'll be with your family soon," he said. Mercy nodded, her voice barely a whisper. Do you think Papa will? Rest now. Boone placed a hand on her shoulder. I think he already has. That evening, Boone helped Briggs' men lower Silas's remains into a temporary coffin. The wagon would take him east to be buried in Arlington. Briggs had insisted. A fallen operative of the Union deserved more than desert sand. Mercy clung to the pickaxe Boone had used to break her chain. She said she wanted to keep it. Not because it had saved her, but because it reminded her she wasn't trapped anymore. You're free now, Boone told her, but Mercy shook her head. I don't think I'll ever be free. Not fully. You don't have to be, Boone said. You just have to keep moving. At dawn, Briggs and his men mounted up to head east. Mercy climbed into the wagon, sitting beside the officer tasked with escorting her. She turned back to Boone one last time. You won't forget me, will you? He smiled faintly. Not a chance. Then she reached into her dress and pulled out the worn map fragment. Take it, she said. I don't want it. Boone hesitated. You sure? She nodded. Papa said it was cursed, but I think maybe just needed to be in the right hands. Boone took the scrap gently and tucked it inside his coat as the wagon rolled away. Mercy waved once. Boone lifted a hand in return, and then she was gone. Weeks later, Boone found himself at the edge of the old mining trail marked on the map. It wasn't gold he was looking for. He wasn't even sure he believed in the treasure anymore. What he found was a stone marker with Silas's initials carved into it. Beneath it, buried in a rusted strongbox, were three things: a journal, written in Silas's hand, a Union badge, tarnished but intact, and a folded letter addressed to whoever finds this. Boone read it under a wide desert sky. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And it means you're either a fool chasing gold or someone who wants to know the truth. I didn't steal for myself. I followed orders, okay? But when the war ended, so did the memory of men like me. All I had left was my daughter, and I made sure she'd outlive the lies they buried me with. If you've met her, I hope you're kind. And if you're the man I dreamed she might meet, thank you. Tell her I kept my promise. I stayed until the end. Boone sat for a long time. The letter folded in his lap. He never dug any deeper. He left the journal and badge in the box, buried it again, and placed the stone back on top. Some treasures didn't belong in banks or museums. Some treasures were meant to stay hidden, like trust, like redemption, like a father's final vow. And as Boone mounted his horse and rode west with the wind at his back, he knew the desert had given him something he hadn't expected: peace, not from gold, but from truth.